It's been said before, and I'll say it again. Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. So where would you rather be than right here and right now on the Ralph Rant? Let's go.
Welcome to the Ralph Rant, your source for hard-hitting Buffalo Bills takes. Now, here's your host of the Ralph Rant, that veteran watcher of generations of Bills teams, the prophet who predicted Josh Allen's greatness, that opinionated so-and-so you've walked out on parties because of, the Ralph.
Welcome to the Ralph Rant. Good morning. We're running a tad late. I hope we're on the air here. I believe we are. It sounds pretty good to me. Let's get the headphones turned up here a little bit. Yes, I can hear it. Excellent, excellent, excellent. It is game day. It is rainy. It's rainy here. It's rainy at the Ralph. Yeah, it's I don't know. What could have been worse? Freezing rain? You know, they say when it rains in an NFL game, the players don't like it nearly as much as snow because the uniforms are able to actually absorb pounds of water each. But in any event, here we go. And we've already had some action this weekend that makes things very, very interesting. And there's a whole thing we could do going over the playoffs, but we've got a lot to cover here today. What happened in last night's games, both of which have an effect on the Buffalo Bills. And then, of course, what's going on today with the early games. The Bills, of course, kick off at 4:25 from the Ralph. We're going to talk about the weather forecast. We're going to talk about injuries. And we will not get to the inactives, of course, because we're an early show here. The inactives won't be out until about 2:55 p.m. However, I think we can guess on some of those based on the injuries that are going on. I'm so rushed this morning. Didn't even get rid of my gum yet. But I do have a cup of coffee. Well, I certainly hope you do also. Thank you ever so much for joining me here this morning on the pregame show. Yep, grounded fresh. It's pretty strong. Actually, a little bit of real heavy whipping cream in it. Not whipped. We do that, though, sometimes, too, which is awesome. But at any rate, let's see. All right, that's good there. So let's talk about what we've got going on today. And I think, of course, the first thing is pretty easy. The weather forecast today at the Ralph. And I'm going to go ahead and look up the very latest on it. But it appears as though it's 100% chance of rain. The rain chances increase as we go along throughout the day. And let's go to the forecast here, if I can get to it. Not that I believe it's going to be anything different. And we're going to Orchard Park. Oh, Orchard Orc doesn't work. You got to put the P in there. Oh, now it's going to Arizona. Guys, I'm telling you, I'm behind the 8 ball today. There we go. Boy, we've got a lakeshore flood warning, a high wind warning. That's tomorrow, and today there's just a flood watch. Fortunately, it'll be largely out of the wind, but today's forecast is rain, mainly after 11 a.m., with a high near 45 degrees, so temperatures won't really be an impact. South wind around 6 miles per hour. Chance of precipitation is 100% new precipitation amounts between 1/4 and a half an inch possible. Then tonight, they're talking about rain mainly before 5 a.m., low around 36, breezy 7 to 12 miles an hour. Again, 100% chance of precipitation. So certainly it's basically 100% chances of precip the entire way around. And then to get a good look here at what's going on in the stadium right now, we've got the handy My Radar app. I would suggest having it. And we're looking across here. And really, it's interesting. I'm looking at this, and the rain has not really gotten, it looks like, to Western New York yet. It's tracking about a halfway. You probably can't see this too well in the glare, but about about half the lake width of Lake Erie, it's crossed on its way to Buffalo. So we'll see about that as it goes along. Of course, we're going to get to your comments today, but first of all, interesting results on the games last evening. And I, of course, did not choose to partake of Peacock and spend $10.99 for one game. I don't like to basically help support the sheer corporate greed. I already pay for the NFL Sunday ticket. And if you take those games off of Sundays and put them on Saturdays, I guess the Sunday ticket does not count for the NFL. And instead, they sell the games off like they did to Netflix, of course, on the Christmas games. And it was interesting with some of that. You could see some of the graphics were off. I don't know who they have working some of these things. I know they get the networks to actually cover the games, but you could see mistakes in graphics. You could see a 1st and 10 up on the graphic at the lower third of the screen. And of course, we knew it was maybe 3rd and 8 or something, and then it quickly disappears. And someone, please, can we find someone other than Rich Eisen to call a game? Rich Eisen is not a play-by-play man. Perhaps he's got donkey pictures of someone, and they allow him to do that each year, at some point or another. But Rich Eisen is just terrible on the calls. So at any rate, you can see we've got the studio kind of decorated here. The lights actually don't show up that well here in the bright light of the studio illumination. However, I will indicate to you, of course, happy holidays. I hope you had a great Christmas and are having a great week between Christmas and New Year's. One of the finest weeks of the year, certainly. And definitely hope that everyone got what they wanted. You could see I'm sporting a fine new Bills shirt here. And kind of got to get out of the way here a little bit. Add a little shelf here. We've got a new book, Nowhere Else You'd Rather Be, which is a wonderful historical pictorial of the Ralph that includes not just the football, but the concerts, the very first Winter Classic when the hockey game was played there years ago with the Sabres, I believe, in the Pittsburgh Penguins, if memory serves. So got a lot of that good stuff going, and I probably, that's about where I had to put it, and of course the microphone covers it up. And definitely here we've got some figurines. We've got Marv Levy and Jim Kelly on the other side. And here we've got, he looks like he's clean shaven here, but this is going to be Josh and McDermott here. And interesting, the packaging actually shows McDermott with the McDermott sort of beard, which I actually sport also. So we'll get those guys back in place there. But the games yesterday, and to start with, it was fascinating. If you ever follow Hansel on X, he's got some really good points, and I don't have it right in front of me. Excuse me, but last night, C.J. Stroud for the Texans started off 2 for 2 for 138 yards or something like that and 2 touchdowns. I don't know what the Chargers were doing to start that game. You know, the whole idea is that the receivers are able to run anywhere on the field they want. And it's not required that you give them 8 to 10 yards of separation and let them lope in for 2 scores and take a quick 14-0 lead. And then on the other side, the Chargers looked like they came in playing scared and, of course, couldn't do anything on offense early on. And this game looked like it could be 34-0 before it got too far. And then the Chargers kind of woke up a little bit. And moreover, the defense woke up somewhat. And after that, C.J. Stroud had a far worse passing output and ended up with 2 interceptions. It should have had at least one more in watching the game if you saw that. So that result with Houston winning and the Chargers losing, that was good and bad for the Bills on both counts. Because on the first hand, you could say, well, all right, that's good for the Bills. The Chargers lost. The Chargers were in front of the Bills in the seeding. And indeed, because of the result, the Bills moved up to the 5th seed overnight as a result of the Chargers' loss. But on the other hand, you had Houston winning. And the worry about Houston winning for me is in not wanting to have the Bills travel to Houston. It becomes a situation where if the Bills were to stay one game ahead of Houston, as they are now, and as they also need to be winning this afternoon, hopefully, versus the Eagles. But what that win did is it's probably putting Houston in position to possibly win the AFC South. And of course, that also is having to do with where Jacksonville sits with the loss Indianapolis took on Monday night. That knocked them out of the playoffs, but they have a chance to play a little bit of a spoiler in the sense that they're playing the Jags today, I believe. But I think, moreover, what you have to look at is the fact that if Houston does win the division, they will get a home game. They would have priority over Buffalo for home games. And if it came to it, they would end up playing there. So, excuse me. So I guess I'd almost be hoping for the Jaguars to win the division and keep Houston in the wild card, but Buffalo would have to win its game today in order to stay ahead of Houston in the wild card, leaving aside what Houston might be able to do in winning the division. So we've got that situation. And then, of course, in the second game, more often you would want to see anytime that there's interconference play between AFC and NFC, that as a Bills fan, you would want to see another AFC team lose. But in this case, we really didn't want that. It was better for the Bills, actually, that the Ravens won the game. And the reason for that is that now that sets up what's probably depending on today's result for Pittsburgh, but that sets up a possible playoff game for the AFC North division next week when the Steelers and Ravens meet in the final regular season game. And had the Ravens lost and taken and basically kept themselves out of the playoff conversation, that might have given Pittsburgh the ability to rest in week 18. And if things otherwise stayed the same and Buffalo was going to visit them from the 5 seed where they currently reside, because right now Buffalo would be going to Pittsburgh if the playoffs started this instant. So if that was the case, then Pittsburgh would be able to perhaps rest next week, not worrying about the outcome of their game with the Ravens, and therefore have a week's rest, more or less, coming in to the wild card game with the Bills if things stay like that. Now, on the other hand, you might have the Bills being of the sense of, look, we're in the playoffs. We don't really particularly care where we go. Who really scares us? Who really scares us? I mean, right now the Ravens look quite scary, actually, with Tyler Huntley. I mean, my goodness, and that was quite a game between two backup quarterbacks last night. And then certainly with the situation with the Ravens winning offers the Bills the chance to have Pittsburgh have to play a game next week. And then the Bills do have the advantage, of course, in the final regular season game versus the Jets. If they need it, the Jets don't look like they're putting much out in these games, and perhaps they have mailed it in or checked out on the season. And the Bills getting that win, the final regular season game at the Ralph, would be a big help. And so a lot of what's going to go on for the Bills is really happening today, including the 1:00 games, and then of course with their 4:25 contest with the Eagles. So, at any rate, let's not let the comments simmer here too long in the stove because they're going to burn. And we'll get to them here. I got a lot of the good guys in the house. Badass Merch is here. Charles Stone is here. We got the good old Go Bills, certainly. Charles Stone, Arthur Motes posted some pictures of his family and him for their Christmas. They were in Bills red. Now, I know maybe that was because, red, it's a Christmas sort of color. But at least they weren't gold and black, although Arthur is definitely a Steelers fan as well. Charles Stone here. I'll be monitoring the two games that are of importance to the Bills, Patriots and Jets, and also the Steelers and the Browns. And the Patriots and Jets, there's weather there, and I think that gives the Jets a possibility. We'll just see how that goes. One thing you could say for sure is that Aaron Glenn, being a first-year head coach, is wanting to have something good happen for this team at the end of the season, which, again, that might be the same attitude they have next week versus the Bills. But if we get a 2 Bills wins and a Patriots loss, the division is still in play. And in fact, at this point, because of how it is going, really the 1 seed is actually still in play for the Bills. Perhaps not likely, but go Jets indeed from Badass Merch. A Steelers loss makes next week's Steelers game against the Ravens a showdown for the NFC North Division Championship. Indeed. The Ralph Rant show is coming up shortly. Get your act together, pal. Get your act together. Get the let out. Badass Merch, yes, absolutely. Morning, brother. Happy holidays to you and the family. Go Bills. Hey, Tommy, good morning. Happy holidays to you too, my brother. What a great week it's been. Well, of course, it was another green Christmas here in Southeast Michigan. But it then turned sparkly with an ice storm the other day. And now we are getting the same rain here that is destined for the Ralph. Continuing here, bad matchup against the Eagles. What we're bad at, the Eagles are good at. Actually, I've got something to show you on that, Jason Bush, who is in the house here, by the way, also, that you will be very interested in seeing. Orchard Park doesn't expect rain until 1 p.m. And I agree with that, Charles Stone, because if you take a look at the radar, that's at least good for the tailgaters of people who are there early, that they're not getting soaked all day, but it certainly will be raining. We've got Jeff in the house. Like, subscribe, comment, ask Steven to sell the Ralph Rant jerseys. Indeed, we made some moves on that this week. I saw another podcaster, Pat Moran with Talking Buffalo, has done the same thing. We will have some stuff available, some more news on that in the next show. So thank you very much for that. I was saying the same thing. Eisen was awful. Badass Merch here. Yes, he is. He doesn't even know the right things to say. It's crazy. Yep, Rich Eisen was not good at all. Merry late Christmas, everyone. Have a safe and happy New Year. Let's go Bills. Jason Bush. Indeed, sir. Indeed. I think it might be the worst game announcing I've ever heard. Really. Yes, that was cool. Smash the like button. Indeed. And yes, if you are new to the channel, and we do have growing numbers here this morning, who do we have here on this Sunday morning? We got 26 here on YouTube, and there's another 7 of you out on X lurking about watching. Unfortunately, the ability for StreamYard to show your comments here does not exist. But thank you very much for joining. And indeed, if you do make it over to YouTube, take the nanosecond required to hit that subscribe button. Sweet Bill swag for Christmas. I'm glad you decorated the set for the holiday. Nice. Yes, Fume Drummer, thank you very much for that. And I will say this. There is a tradition in this household with Christmas decorations, nothing to do with the Jeff Foxworthy calendar. You might be a redneck if, and one of those ifs, I think there's a couple of them. You might be a redneck if you've never been conscious at the end of a Super Bowl. That's one. Another one is you might be a redneck if you're taking your Christmas lights down in April. Well, we don't wait that long, but indeed, the Christmas decorations here, each and every year, stay up until the Buffalo Bills are done playing football. And that's often been a playoff exit either in the divisional round or the title rounds, which get us out towards the end of January. And yes, I proudly keep the lights up, and we'll do so here in the studio also. Now, the ones on top, that's kind of strange. Oh boy, you can see that little bit of tape on top, and those fell down towards the Buffalo. I don't know, that they look pretty nice on the black background anyway. Baddest merch, so agree, saying to Schlegs, and that was about probably the great announcing. I'm trying to forget that from last night. Yes, the Chargers were terrible, mistake after mistake. Makes you really wonder if players are gambling on games. I really don't think so. One great old saying, there's two great sayings. I always like to apply them to the Bills. Number one, opportunities are to be seized, not drooled upon. That's one I live by and try to still attempt to stop drooling, of course, at my advanced age here. But the other one, and this really has an impact, and it's very true, never attribute to treachery that which can be explained by incompetence. Never attribute to treachery that which can be explained by incompetence. And we're going to get to talking about this. Thank you, Schlegs, for that comment. Stephen, what is your confidence in Buffalo stopping the Eagles' running attack? DaQuan Jones is out today. Yeah, that is true. DaQuan is out, which is tough. Shaq Thompson is playing, though, and we've had now certainly TJ Sanders has gotten some more time since. One thing I think we could say is often that when Buffalo really wants to stop the run, they can actually do something with that. And I don't believe that Jalen Hurts is not a quarterback that is going to dice you up like a Joe Burrow or even getting rid of it quickly, even like Drake May, if you want to dip down that far in talking about quarterbacks. But I believe the Bills actually have a chance to handle the Eagles today. The Eagles got beat 3 games in a row, and then they have gotten back on track a little bit, beating up on some lesser teams. So we'll see how that goes today. But I'm confident in the Bills today at home. And you know, I think some things have to be discussed about last week's game. Also, I had my big Predator video talking about how the Bills play their games and go about it in a fashion that makes them look like they're predatory, the way they perhaps allow teams to get up early and then come back late on them. Interestingly, and of course, part of it had to do with Josh Allen tweaking his foot last week. The Bills had a lesser second half rather than first, as they usually do. But I think, once again, that was also something that either intentional or just how it happened. But the Bills did prove one thing last week. They could win a game essentially without Josh Allen. They could win a game essentially without Josh Allen because Josh Allen did not have the contributions of long scrambles, some of the throws he would normally have made, and certainly after the foot tweak, had a few rough series there, and that being in effect. So I think the Bills demonstrated that to themselves. But now they are back home. They're back at the Ralph. And this Eagles team is another team they have a score to settle with. The Eagles came in here about 4 or 5 years ago. Hey, look what we've got. A very wet dog. Yeah, let's get this comment off the screen and we can see this nasty beast. This is a 95-pound Doberman and Greyhound mix, I think. Her name is Bailey. She's a beast. If it weren't so early, I'd do the trick where I stick my head in her mouth. It's pretty good. We used to make good money doing that. No, just teasing on that. But yeah, I believe the Bills seem able to rise to certain occasions. Yes, there's the worry that Saquon Barkley is going to run all over them today. I have confidence that the Bills are going to handle this game, and I'll tell you who else has confidence that the Bills are going to win this game today. Nick Wright. First things first, don't hit your head on the table. You'll jiggle my coffee. Nick Wright has predicted the Bills will win this game 30-21. And we've got a couple of situations going on with injuries on their side of it, which we could also talk about as we go along here. Mark is here. Hey, Ralph, enjoy the game. Thank you, sir. I certainly will enjoy all of them. Bills 17, Eagles 14. In the rain, it's a possibility. It's a possibility. With that much water, the field could be a little bit slick. I don't trust Jalen Hurts. To me, Jalen Hurts needs to have a very specific and narrow path in order to be good, and that isn't always the case for him. Yes, the Bills need to win out to get the 5 seed and play the Steelers in round 1 and not face the Texans until the AFC Championship game. And that is if the Texans get that far. I actually think there's flaws with the Texans. Schlegs, keep the Bills in play for the 1 seed, though. Keeps the Bills in play for the 1 seed, though, with the Chargers losing. If New England somehow loses one and the Chargers beat the Broncos next week when the Bills went out, they are the 1 seed. And, you know, what we saw the other night, and again, I feel this about most of the rest of the AFC competition. And when we're looking actually at, let's go ahead and look at the playoff picture over here. Who scares you? Bo Nix? I mean, with Chris Oladokun playing quarterback for the Chiefs on Christmas night, the Broncos look really, really ordinary. And then the Chargers, Justin Herbert. I've heard so many people talk about so many things with Justin Herbert, how great he is. I've never seen it. I've never felt it. Drake May, we already put that punk in his place. CJ Stroud, they'd be better off with Davis Mills. Davis Mills doesn't throw interceptions. Stroud threw 2 last night and should have thrown more. There was at least one more that was dropped, as I stated earlier. Trevor Lawrence, the Prince with the Jaguars. No, perhaps they've been looking better, but it's the Jags, and I just don't see it. And then finally, the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has never beat the Bills, so I don't know really who scares you, and it's more about perhaps wanting to avoid the Texans defense. But yes, this is all very true and all very interesting how this is going to work out. It's really an exciting end of the season, actually. Cecil McDogg's there. No, Schlegs, Jags must drop a game too. 1 seed is not going to happen. Well, that's mathematically still possible, but and we can predict who's going to win or lose. But as the Swami always said, that's why they play the games. Yeah, the Jags have to lose also, certainly, and we'll just see. And as far as getting the 1 seed, that would be great. It could go a number of different ways because the Bills could still end up with their playoff spot they have now, with other things going as they do. Even if they win today, have next week's game a sit-down game against the Jets because there's nothing further they can advance, which doesn't hurt them also in terms of some of the injury situations. Heading into enemy territory to watch the game with full Bills gear on. Go Bills. Norm, the Bills fan. Norm, you've got to expound on that, where you're going with all that gear to watch the game. That would be great to hear. Cesar McDowell, unfortunately, the Jets and Finns are tanking too, and the Chargers have nothing to play for, so they will likely rest players. Yeah, and if that's the case, then the Bills can only do what they could do on this. It sure, and I hate to put on and the rear view mirror glasses and talk about hindsight, but the loss to the Falcons is the one that probably stings the most. Jags play the Colts this week, though, and the Colts can still get in. No, the Colts are eliminated at this point. The Colts are eliminated as a result of their loss the other night. However, they still have Phillip Rivers playing, and any team that gets eliminated like that is sure going to want to inflict some kind of damage on their division opponents. So I would count on the Colts not doing anything but trying to play their best. If it all fell the Bills' way, that would be awesome. Woke is Joke is here. For whatever it's worth, I've seen Buffalo play the Jags in Jacksonville and Texas and Houston. Both bad losses. I'd rather see them play elsewhere in the playoffs like Denver or Pittsburgh. Well, that's true. That's true. And you don't know how much those histories will be in effect. Mark is back with us here. If the NFL keeps on doing these paywall games, I'll seriously stop watching them. I remember when the NFL would put games on for the holiday weekends for free. No more. And I won't partake either. I did not pay Peacock $11 to watch that game last night. I actually had a very enjoyable experience. What I did was I threw on the earbuds, whatever they're called, went onto the iPad and dialed up Westwood One to listen to their broadcast of the game. And listening to football on the radio can be an interesting experience. It was kind of fun. A couple of great announcers that they had, and that was enjoyable. I feel good no matter who the Bills play, really. But 3 road games is tough, is the thing. Well, that's true. However, we'll see. We'll see. The Bills are just going to have to muster up for those particular games. And one of the things we're definitely hoping for, of course, is that Ed Oliver is going to be available to the Bills, and that we get Jordan Poyer back. That'll be also important. And then the defensive line just starting to get it on some of the run stop situations here. They probably got better things to do on Easter than to take Christmas lights off. Yeah, I never wait that long. That's for sure. Jacob Spears. The Jets could upset the Pats with the injuries. And that's interesting because we're going to look at some of those games here as we go along. Poyer is out today. Yes, Poyer, both of the JPs. Big Phil, Jordan Phillips, Jordan Poyer. And then Matt Prater remains out. And then, of course, DaQuan Jones is out. So those are the 4 that we are missing. And will probably make up a good bit of the inactive list. We also saw that McCole Hardman was actually released from the team. And that gives the opening for one of the other receivers to be in. It was interesting they had him active last week. Yes. No, apply that treachery and incompetence quote to politicians. Yes. Genesee Ben. That is a pretty interesting mug you got going there in that picture. Awesome. Welcome into the show, certainly. If Coleman sits out this week, I think he's on the chopping block in the offseason. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And I think the other thing that we want to look at is the fact that Gabe Davis is certainly has a playoff thing to him as well as Josh Allen does. And I would, if Gabe is once again inactive today and the Bills are going to just try to pull this off with what they've got, then we'll see, because they are at least in the playoffs for sure. Josh's first win against the Dirty Birds. Go Bills, indeed. Beth Plant, 1472. One of those wonderful YouTube. Let's add some numbers to screw up everybody's handle. Welcome in. Thanks for being on the show. And again, if you are new here, the numbers are climbing here this morning. Please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit like on the video. And after the games are over with today, and of course, we get past the weekend and we see where everything sits going into the last week, I will be doing a video on all of the playoff iterations that will be out early in the week. So stand by for that. I have a feeling the Bills are just bored with the regular season, need that playoff game buzz. Well, they are playing the world champions today, and I think they have got a score to settle with this team. Again, the Eagles beat the Bills pretty well middle of the season, about 4 or 5 years ago, I believe. And then, of course, there was the game, after the Tampa Bay game, I believe, 2 years ago, when the Bills had to win out, or was that 3 years ago? Oh, my Lord. But they lost in overtime, I believe, or lost very close to the Eagles. So they got a score to settle with the Eagles, in my estimation. Knox reception, touchdown, and only 37 yards receiving earns him $300K. Shakir, 1 TD, earns him $150K. Look for Allen to help get them paid today. You know, I think we're going to see one or the other of those tight ends, those sitting today, and I believe it might be Knox that will be inactive today. They're maintaining Dalton Kincaid, and I believe Kincaid is in a position to play. But the other thing to note, if you didn't see it last night, they actually signed Malaki Latu to the active roster. I believe he was out of elevations from the practice squad. So if they had to sign him to the active, that certainly means one of the DKs is out. My guess, it is going to be Knox that's not playing. Jason Bush, I'd like a Ralph Rant jersey. Absolutely. Well, you know, it's reproducing the one that was actually created is going to be tough, but we're going to do them with sort of the Ralph Rant logo that you see on, well, in fact, here it is right here. It's partially cut off on this monitor because we're, these images I use for our thumbnails often get a little bit larger here on the plasma display, but it'll be that sort of look. Oh, here we go. Norm, we are Norm, the Bills fan, talking about enemy territory. We are in Fenwick Island, all Eagles all the time at our favorite bar. Well, they're not Bills Mafia, and I'll let them know that. We are representing loud and proud. Absolutely. Looking forward to do that. Jets hate New England. Yes, they do. That's you know, when we're talking about this of these division games, as I've said many times on this show, division games are different. They are different. And oftentimes you could take the point spreads, your thoughts on the game, all of this, and just throw it out because division games have a nastiness to them. And that's why the NFL has so many of them packed in. And of course, every single team in the league in the last game of the season now plays a division game. I don't know how long the NFL's had that in place, but that has been the case. Time to coffee up, guys. And if you've got eggnog with a little bit of spiced rum this morning, go ahead and do that. Fume Drummer, speaking of listening to football on the radio, back in the blackout days, all Buffalo had was Van Miller and John Murphy on the radio. They did a good job. In fact, if you go onto YouTube, you can get a number of those games, but you can go and get it's actually the second half of the comeback against the Oilers. And it's the game film, but it's got the radio backing behind it. But in those days, apparently Van Miller, they had 4 guys in the booth. They had Van Miller and 3 color analysts who just would not shut the fuck up. And Van, you could tell, was getting a little bit perturbed with trying to call the game, and there's guys, making comments over the tops of refs' calls and so forth. We definitely miss Van Miller, though. Van had that great voice, and it developed that buzz and edge to it when the games got wild, and he came up with so many good sayings. It is pandemonium. It is fandemonium. Or at the end of 51-3, when he could finally say, and the Buffalo Bills are going to the Super Bowl. And I have a feeling we're going to be hearing that again this season. The Bills are well positioned, and there is not another quarterback in the tournament that is anything like Josh Allen. Is Gabe Davis playing today? We don't know. We actually don't know. We'll have to see the inactives when they come out. Of course, last week they had both Gabe and Keon Coleman inactive, and actually had Mecole Hardman active. Now Mecole Hardman is no longer a Buffalo Bill, so we'll see what happens with that. We DPM. We don't know the actives yet. No, we won't know until, what is it, 2:55? Yeah, for a 4:25 game. The inactives must come out 90 minutes or before. Pretty puppy. I've got 3 puppies, all around 90 pounds. Nice. Yeah, we've got two more here also. That was the big one. We've got a medium one that looks part Rottweiler but is much more slender than you would expect for a Rott. And then we also have a King Charles Spaniel, better known as a Cavalier. But this is a big Cavalier. He's 33 pounds. He is the NFL guard version of a Cavalier. This dog's got some shoulders on him. I'm told that he's fat. I don't see it. He's just big. And he rules the other dogs. Pats lost, Jags lost would be Christmas miracle, but would rather save miracles for the playoffs. JD is in the house with us. Yeah, absolutely. And, quite frankly, how do we want the Bills to go through this? It's a tough situation. They've never won a playoff game on the road with Sean McDermott. I believe the Bills are 7-6 in playoff contests. Of course, the very first one without Josh Allen under McDermott was at the Jaguars with a 10-3 loss. And then what were the other losses? Of course, to Houston in 2019, yes. Or second season? No, I think it was because they were 6-10 with Josh Allen in 18. So it would have been 2019, yes. And we're up on Houston. Josh Allen actually scored the touchdown with a pass to him, and that being upended into the end zone, if you recall. But they allowed Houston to come back and win that game. And then there was the loss 27-10 to the Bengals in the Damar Hamlin year. And then, of course, 3 more exits with the at the hands of the Chiefs. And that would have been 2 division games and then an AFC championship game. Black Cloud is here. Sorry I'm late. Baltimore destroying Green Bay last night. They have a slight chance of making the playoffs if they went out and get some help. Do you think we could stop Henry from running all over us again? I don't think it's going to happen. I think Pittsburgh has their number, and Pittsburgh is playing Cleveland today. Now maybe Cleveland comes back and looks great again today, but it's a possibility. But quite frankly, Lamar doesn't scare you either. And yes, you can worry about Henry running all over us again, but the Bills seem to have the Ravens' number. You can talk about like the Chiefs have the Bills' number in the playoffs, as history would show over the past few years. Well, the Bills have the Ravens' number. So I'm really not worried about any of these teams, really. I mean, there's things to worry about them, but if you talk about quarterback, and certainly what's going on with Lamar Jackson. He goes out last week with a rib injury, and then he still can't go. And these skinny ass quick quarterbacks, they get beat up and hurt. Jaden Daniels is another one. They actually had to sit him down for the rest of the season. If they see each other in the playoffs, that is, yes, of course, understood on that. Welcome in, Black Cloud. Good to see you here today. Yeah, I don't want to play the Ravens. That's the one game I don't want. Yeah, you can make an argument. Van will always be the voice to the Bills, just like RJ for the Sabres. Well, yeah, Rick Jeanneret, but there was another, perhaps the best, play-by-play voice ever in the history of the world. And you guys know who I'm talking about. The Sabres play-by-play voice before Rick. Ted Darling. Ted Darling was amazing. Go listen to some old Sabres highlights with Ted Darling making the call. You talk about the perfect voice for hockey. But the one thing I always loved that Ted Darling would do, especially when we were listening to a Sunday night game on the radio before there was Sunday Night Football. This is way back. And the Sabres would be on and play is proceeding and so forth. And, of course, they didn't have as many nets. You just had the glass up high in the rink. And somebody would hit a puck and it would flip into the crowd. And Ted Darling goes, and there's a souvenir from a fan from Lackawanna. Now, of course, he has no idea who that was, but who it would be, where they might be from. But he would just say that. And I thought it was great. Go look up Ted Darling. Born in New England, die a Bills fan. That's my motto. All right, Beth, where in New England then? Okay. Well, that's that's a thing. I when I used to tour with bands, we played in Woonsocket, Rhode Island one time. I had no idea how close that was to Patriots country before I got there. Oh boy. Black Cloud, did you speak about the weather today? It's going to be a sloppy mess, probably a run-heavy game. Hopefully Barkley and Hurts don't run all over our defense today. It is going to be it is going to be very wet. It's going to be wet on the field, and that field, of course, at the Ralph is quite crowded. If you ever go there to a game, you can really see it with the yard stripes going across the field. So there will be water runoff, but that's runoff towards the edges where these guys like to run. I think it will be easier though than what we saw the Bills try to deal with snow on the field. Though, again, when I was at the Ravens at the Bengals game where the snow had fallen and we got down onto the field after the game. And there was the areas of snow that remained between the yard lines. You saw them blowing off the yard lines throughout. And it was kind of crusty. That would have made it far more difficult. So this will be the first very rainy game I think the Bills have had in quite some time. So it should be interesting. It should be interesting. Lamar knew right where the camera was to make his fake gesture when entering the locker room with another of his fake injuries. Well, Lamar, of course, we even remember the one night he got run off the field and into the locker room. And of course, it wasn't due to injury. Nature was calling. He probably had, I don't know, too many jalapenos or something like that. And was able to get back out. I think they might have had to cart him off because walking was untenable, especially wearing those white breeches that the Ravens were wearing that night. All right, enough of that. I actually feel all right about the Texans again. They gave us their best shot. The Bills played terrible and still had their shot to win that game. They aren't playing that bad against the Texans again. Schlegs, I agree with that comment wholeheartedly. I mean, we even saw the Chargers last night sort of get past that initial shock and fright of this defensive front and how they rushed. I mean, my goodness, Chargers couldn't do anything early on, but they ended up getting it figured out. And yes, even with the 8 sacks, even with all the problems the Bills had in that game, I mean, right at the end, and you've heard me say this before, but they had a second down, I believe that I think it was second down where Josh Allen was going to flip the ball to Khalil Shakir and didn't quite get it over the outstretched hand of Will Anderson Jr. And unfortunately, that got tipped away. Shakir probably scores on that. Or, of course, there was the throw to Gabe Davis where Gabe had a toe out of bounds. And then certainly Josh screws up on that last throw when he tries to go to Knox and had an open receiver otherwise. But then they were at fourth down and probably could have gotten that fourth down, but then Dion, who is still all excited about getting the key to the city, Dion Dawkins, decided to stand up in his stance, and Bills got the penalty. Yes, and Buffalo was inches a number of times from winning that game. After all of that, right? And that's an excellent point. Texans winnable if we get them at home. We're also due to a W in Houston, silver lining. That's very true because thanks, JD. And that's the case because it's hard to beat teams twice. And yeah, how could this work out? And the Bills, if they do even end up at the 5 seed, and we could take a look at this with the playoffs. I mean, in fact, let's go ahead and look at it where it stands right now. At this moment before the 1 o'clock contest start. We've got the Broncos as the 1 seed. They have the bye. Right now, the Chargers would be at the Patriots, 7-2. I like the Chargers' chances there. I think that the Patriots have demonstrated that they're vulnerable. They've got a couple of injuries going on now also. I guess they do have Travion Henderson back from concussion protocol, but the Chargers I just believe the Chargers could handle the Patriots. There's history with the Chargers actually traveling to New England back when the quarterback of the Chargers was one Phillip Rivers, and there was some great games there, but the Chargers I think would play well there. Texans and Jags, that's almost a coin flip. Hopefully they would beat each other up and be ineffective going forward. And then the Bills at the Steelers, 5 going to 6. Now, how could this work out? Well, is it possible that the Chargers can beat the Patriots if this were hypothetically the playoffs? Sure. Can the Texans beat the Jaguars? Absolutely. Closely matched. The Bills have already demonstrated that they could beat the Steelers. Aaron Rodgers never beats the Bills. If you had that the case, you have now knocked out the 2, 3, and 4 seeds and their ability to host games. And if that ended up being the case, then you would have a division matchup with the Chargers going to the Broncos. And I don't think much of the Broncos recently. They've had a lot of these one-score games. They could not get way up on Kansas City, who had gotten beaten the week before by the Titans. So I would like the Chargers at the Broncos. That would be the remaining 7 seed, the lowest remaining seed going to the top. And then you would have a situation of the Bills hosting the Texans, if that were the case. So in that case, now you've got 3 of the 4 division leaders gone. Those seeds are gone. And if the Chargers were to beat the Broncos and the Bills got revenge against the Texans at home, 5 hosting 6, then you would have the 5 seed Buffalo Bills hosting the AFC Championship game against the Chargers. That could happen. And of course, there's big history with those two teams. This goes way back to AFL days. But the Bills' 1963 and 1964 championships were both won against the Chargers. And I think the Bills beat them 20-7, and then they shut them out the next season at I believe it was at Buffalo. I'm not sure if that was the one at Buffalo or at San Diego, but that was the game with the hit heard around the world where Bills linebacker Harry Jacobs hit Keith Lincoln in the ribs as he was reaching up to catch a ball and put him out of the game. And it was actually, that might have been the game where the Chargers were actually up on them, and the whole game changed at that point. Let's get back here. What comment are we on? Boy, we got the comments building up here. Black Cloud, did you hear the rumor the Pittsburgh offense has been given instructions to do everything they can to keep Garrett from breaking the sack record, including doing intentional holding? Yeah. I would not be surprised. I mean, that's a division contest with teams that hate each other. And no, the last thing you want is for that to happen. And of course, there's tough history between those teams. You recall a few years back when they were playing, and there was the fight, and Myles Garrett ripped off Mason Rudolph's helmet and was swinging the helmet at him. The Bills will win today. Robert Leader in the house. Thank you very much for that. I'll drink to that. It's not alcoholic, of course not. But it's pretty damn good coffee, which I just spilled on myself, drooling on myself. Showing my age here. The excitement of Buffalo Bills football makes you spit up your coffee. What else have we got here? 73 had a concussion in the first meeting. Yes, that is very true. That's very true. And he was down after that game. And that was a tough contest. Plus, we're talking about Houston. We had Spencer Brown also with problems in that game. Couldn't remember Ted's name. Kept on thinking Rick Azar, but knew I was wrong. Rick Azar, there's another name from the past. Rick Azar, the great sports reporter for WKBW in Buffalo. He was on with Irv Weinstein, one of the greatest anchor guys ever. And, of course, Tom Joles with the weather outside. How many of you guys are remembering all of that stuff? And Rick Azar, yeah. Rick was great. We saw him one day in a store shopping for sneakers. I remember that when I was a kid. I'll never forget that day. That was strange. And the Bills turned it over 3 times versus the Texans, and the Texans didn't turn it over. Not going to happen again. Stroud likes throwing picks. Yes, he demonstrated that. In fact, he got a little bit worried that he got 2 touchdowns last night, so he had to change tactics and start getting those picks that he likes so much. Sabres won last night. We win today. You know, now there's something. And the Sabres have been stringing some wins together, I have understood here recently. Tell them our path to the Super Bowl. Well, that's exactly what we did there. And I think I think that path partially includes the Bills hosting the AFC title game. If we're going to reverse engineer the Bills at the Super Bowl. Well, if they're at the Super Bowl, that means they've won the title game. If they could win the title game at home, that probably more ensures that situation. So how could the Bills at the 5 seed as it stands right now hope to host the title game? Well, it's quite easy. The Patriots, Jaguars, and Steelers would have to get knocked out in the wild card weekend. That would leave just one division leader remaining, the Broncos, is the 1 seed who have the bye, would have the bye at this point if the playoffs ended or started today, rather. So that would have a situation then where then you would have the Chargers visiting the Broncos in the divisional round, and then you'd have the Texans visiting the Bills. Now we're counting on the Bills winning out. That's why today's game is so important. If the Texans are going to stay as a wild card, which could be the case, the Bills can basically control their destiny and make sure that they would host the Texans in any game where they met. If they both keep on winning, that means Buffalo has to win today in order to do that. Otherwise, the Texans would jump Buffalo and put the Bills as the 7th seed after today if the Bills were to lose. But that's not going to happen, we know. But again, getting to that path of the Bills hosting an AFC Championship game, so then you would have Texans at Bills for the divisional round, Chargers at Broncos for the divisional round. Chargers-Broncos, divisional game. I don't think much of the Broncos. I think the Chargers win that game. And if that's the case, the Chargers as the 7th seed would end up traveling to the Bills after beating the Texans at the Ralph. Then you would have the AFC title game at the Ralph. And wouldn't that be something if the Bills start out the playoffs on the road, but then they have 2 more games at the Ralph? It is possible. It's quite possible. That was before my time. Yeah, Woonsocket is a bit north of me. Gillette is 45 minutes, but I won't go there again. Got an elbow in the head last time, even though we lost. They're so stupid. Yeah, Patriots, just the sense of entitlement after the dynastic years with Brady. Dawkins got fined for something last week. I don't doubt that. Dawkins is nasty. Van Miller play-by-play, indeed. Fred Smirless. Yes. Good old Fred. Number 76. Put out a book about those years. It's the book was called By a Nose, and Fred had a very impressive nose. Yeah, I got that on the Fred. We're going through them here. Go Eagles. What are you doing in here? No, go Eagles. Yeah, fly, Eagles, fly right into the shitter. Yeah, it's Fred, definitely, and Sleggs. I think the Bills lose today. We don't even play the starters against the Jets. Maybe start Josh Allen for a series so he can keep his starting streak alive, keep the starters fresh for the playoffs. If that happens, it's sort of a dark cloud with a bit of a silver lining in the sense that the Bills could have a manufactured bye versus the Jets. It'd be kind of sad to see that would be the case for the very final game at the Ralph, because as the 7th seed, they'd have no hope of hosting any playoff games as they would at the 5, as I just described moments ago. So, yeah, you got to wonder. That's what this game today is huge. There's a lot of import, of course, for the Bills' record, certainly for the playoff picture, but also for whatever games might be remaining possible games at the Ralph. So it's huge from a number of those situations. My goodness, I think we've gotten to the bottom of the comments. So I'm going to take another look at the radar here. It's now 11:15 a.m. And that line is certainly moving up, and you can see a lot of the rain shield is covering much of Lake Erie, about the western 2/3 of it. And looking back here, there is a long area of rain coming in here. That's all headed for Buffalo. And it gets heavier later. And that initial line seems to be blending in with everything else. It does look like there's a little bit of freezing rain in there also, but now we know that the temperatures will be coming up, so that's not going to be the situation. Now, for the injury reports, just to go over those again, we've got those here. And a couple of big ones, actually, for the Eagles, which are meaningful. Linebacker Nakobe Dean is out with a hamstring. And then, of course, Lane Johnson, who is the right tackle for Philadelphia, is out. And that's going to make a difference, certainly, for Buffalo and being able to control the line of scrimmage. And then Cameron Williams is also questionable with a shoulder. And now the rest of the guys they've got on the report will all play. Zach Bond, linebacker Jaheed Campbell, defensive tackle Jalen Carter is back in. Fred Johnson, offensive lineman, tight end Cameron Latu, wide receiver Devonta Smith, who had an illness. And I've never seen this before. Wide receiver A.J. Brown, who was a non-participant at practice the other day due to a dental procedure. And now we're seeing that he is on the injury report, but will play, and the notation is teeth. That's a new one. And then Landon Dickerson also had an illness earlier this week, but he will apparently be playing. Now, on the Bills side of it, as we've stated before, DaQuan Jones is out with a calf. That's that same calf he injured weeks ago. And he had a setback with it. Jordan Phillips with the ankle that he injured last week. And then Jordan Poyer, so both of our JPs. Poyer got the hamstring very late in the game on a sack of Shadur Sanders. He seemed to be walking pretty normally after the game. I think that's a case of where, look, rest him. You know you're going to need him for the playoffs, because that's basically going to put either, well, Cam Lewis and Cole Bishop in the back of the defense today, or if Jordan Hancock gets some run back there also. One thing that's fortunate is we've seen Teron Johnson playing a little better lately. Then we've got, to continue in the injury report, Teron isn't listed here, but the DKs, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, both questionable with knees. We know one of them will be probably down today. I'm guessing it's going to be Knox, according to Dr. Kyle Trimble from Banged Up Bills, because Kincaid's situation has been more of a maintenance situation. And we know that, again, because we have heard that the Bills have signed their tight end that was elevated the last 2 or 3 weekends to the active roster, so they will need him. And I don't know if that's a brother. That's Maleki Latu, I believe. And that, I don't know if that's actually a brother of there's a Latu, unless I don't have that name right on our guy. But then, of course, you've got Josh Allen with a foot. These are injury report listings that they will play. Joey Bosa, hamstring. Teron Johnson with the quad. Cam Lewis, hamstring. Shaq Thompson with the neck that we saw last week. Cole Bishop has some ribs, and then Ray Davis with a knee. They were all listed on the injury report. But indeed, it's a situation that they will be out there today. So it's a big day at the Ralph. And this actually could end up being the last big game there. Because even if the Bills win well, even when the Bills win, there could be other results in the league that are going to then be a problem for the Bills advancing their seeding and make next week's game a non-issue and allow the Bills to rest. And probably the only way that really logically happens, if the Bills were to fall to the Eagles today, then next week's result doesn't matter because the Bills are at the 7th seed already and might not be able to improve that situation. But as I described before, the Bills keeping the 5 seed and then having the division winners knocked off, the 2, 3, and 4 seeds knocked off in wild card weekend, then things become interesting because then you would see the Bills back in the position to host a divisional playoff game and an AFC title game, if that's how it occurs. And I think there's been crazier things that we've seen. So, and then of course we're watching today closely with the games at 1:00. And let's get back to those here. I want to take a look at the entire schedule. So we got it on the wrong ID, and that's not coming up quickly. Let's get the NFL here. Let's get the schedule here. So, of course, we've already had Dallas in Washington on Christmas Day, the Netflix extravaganza. Detroit at Minnesota. How about the meltdown of Detroit? I liked when Nick Wright described, incorrectly so, Jared Goff as a civilian. Jared Goff is great on a narrow path to be able to give you what you need. He can throw the ball really well. He's quite accurate and so forth. But that was a mess the other day. That was a mess. And I mean, if you want to talk about a guy looking like he was throwing a game, oh my goodness. And then the Denver-Kansas City result, where Denver did not look that impressive against a Kansas City team that certainly was going to bring some fire to it. It's a division game, but you did not have Patrick Mahomes. He was up in a suite, and you had Chris Oladokun playing quarterback for Kansas City because Gardner Minshew was also up in the suite with Mahomes. Then last night we had Houston, of course, 20-16 over the Chargers. And Houston did most of its damage in its first 2 series. And then, of course, we had Baltimore stomping Green Bay 41-24 behind the legs of Derrick Henry. All right, so we've got Arizona at Cincinnati. That game really doesn't have any impact. Jacksonville at Indianapolis is actually very big at 1:00. Jacksonville losing would be a help to the Bills in terms of the seeding situation and the possibility of a number 1 seed, which is still mathematically in play. Well, it's at Indianapolis. Quite frankly, Indianapolis had a tough time the other night, but Phillip Rivers has looked better each and every game from them. And Jacksonville's coming off that big win against Denver last week. Indianapolis would love nothing more to do a spoiler on that. And then, of course, we've got New England at the Jets. We're rooting for the Jets in that game. It's a possibility. It's a division game. Both of those are division games. Jacksonville at Indy, New England at the Jets. Division games are different. You've heard me say it before. I'll say it again. New Orleans at Tennessee is no impact. Pittsburgh at Cleveland. Well, certainly if Cleveland wins that game, and then it depends on who you'd rather see. If Pittsburgh wins, then it makes the situation for the Ravens. And I don't know exactly how that's going to work if Pittsburgh wins, if the Ravens are still have a chance to win. I think Pittsburgh would have to lose today in order for that to be a game next week with the Ravens at the Steelers to decide the AFC North. Seattle at Carolina is at 1 o'clock also. No effect on the Bills, but very, very interesting. Seattle is now riding with the ability to take the number 1 seed, but Carolina has been very tough lately, and Seattle's traveling, which is a tough bet. That's a 10 o'clock game in the morning for them in terms of their time. Tampa Bay at Miami, no real impact. Giants at Vegas, no real impact. And, of course, we got Philadelphia at Buffalo, which is the feature game. There's only 2 4 o'clock games for that time slot. Giants at Vegas is 4:05, so Philadelphia at Buffalo will be probably one of the most watched games today. And then Chicago at San Francisco tonight is actually huge because there's a lot of playoff implications there. And then you've got the Rams traveling to Atlanta, and the Rams will have impact from the standpoint the Rams are trying to help their seeding, but certainly after the situation of them losing to Seattle last week, that puts Seattle in the driver's seat, and Seattle only needs to win its game. So that's what we're looking at for today's slate of games, and then how this could possibly turn out next week. And there are a number of iterations. In fact, before this weekend started, when you looked at the 6 games this week and 6 games next weekend, that would influence how the Bills will end up in the playoffs, there were 4,096 different possibilities. Now, those have already shrunk because of the games that have already been played, but we'll have a much better feel after today, after we look at what we see for results and what the possibilities are. But again, as far as the rooting interests go, the rooting interest not only for what puts the Bills at the highest possible seed going into the playoffs, but also for controlling who the Bills want to see or don't want to see. But again, the path that makes the most sense would have the best possible outcome for the Bills, perhaps going to the Super Bowl, would be for the seeding to remain as it is now. Now, certainly the Bills still could win the division. They could still get the number 1 seed, but they would need help for that. But they do control their destiny in holding on to the 5 seed. And again, holding on to the 5 seed would have them going to the Steelers for a wild card contest. And if they were to beat the Steelers, and then if the Texans were to beat the Jags as the 6th seed, and if the Chargers beat the Broncos the next week, Chargers would beat the Patriots to start out in the wild card. That would have to happen. Now Patriots, Jaguars, and Steelers are out. That leaves Broncos, Bills, Texans, Chargers. And in that case, for the divisional matchups, Chargers would visit the Broncos, and the Texans would visit the Bills. And I could see both of those games going the way we would want, such that the Buffalo Bills would end up hosting the Los Angeles Chargers in the AFC title game. And the Bills, I think, can beat each and every one and any one of those. So that's what we're looking at, guys, today. That's what we're looking at. That's the outlook, and now we just have to see how these games turn out. And this will be a very interesting one at the Ralph. So we're getting towards 11:30 now. It's about time for inactives to come out for these early games. We'll get a look at those here in a few minutes. But now we wait. So I want to thank you for being here this morning on the show. We will be back. I don't have it scheduled yet, but we'll have it scheduled shortly here before the start of the 1 o'clock games. We're probably looking at scheduling the post-game show for 7:25, 7:30. Might make it as late as 7:45. We'll see how I'm feeling about that timing. Of course, it depends on the outcome of the game and how quickly the game goes by. I mean, hell, that game could be, if there's a lot of running and few penalties, that game could be over by 7 o'clock. And in that case, we might be back early, but I think I'm going to go ahead and have the post-game show scheduled for 7:40 p.m. Taylor Salty will be here. She is making her way back to the house after a performance last night and down in Detroit. So we will be watching the game together, and we will be on the post-game show at that time later on. So until then, thanks for joining the show. I don't think we have any more comments here we want to get to because there are no more. But again, thanks for being here. If you're new to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Like the video if you share and care. That will help the channel very much. And certainly keep those comments coming. As you know, they empower this show. So, at any rate, as we always say, be good, do good, God bless, and go Bills, especially go Bills today against the hated Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions. It's time to dethrone them and get this thing going in the rain. So go Bills. I am the Ralph. This is the Ralph Rant. We'll see you later on the post-game show. Out.